Esatto. Eccetto questo che non si taglia perché c'è il suo campanellino.
Dove
Quindi qua, perfetto, vicino al Presidente. Vicino al Presidente, benissimo. Ottimo. Benissimo. Bene, grazie per la disponibilità.
Le hasard parfois peut aller.
Bene, buon pomeriggio a tutti.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this roundtable on the topic of artificial intelligence between ethics and innovation. Obviously, we are a lot more focused on natural intelligence, which is the one which must be supported. And I think the title already gives away the complexity of this topic. And I'd like to start discussing it by mentioning a few things which need to be kept in mind. Otherwise, we may not understand the urgency of the topic. When Pope Francis referred to a change in era, he underlined a dimension that we seem to be unaware of. Now, a change in era means that for the first time in history, as we know it, man can destroy both himself and creation. In 1945, with nuclear power, we became frightened and we decided to undersign an agreement. It is true that nowadays we talk about technical nuclear power, which is a way of averting fear rather than a way of diminishing the destructive power of nuclear power. And then, as a second wave of destructive power, we are witnessing climate change. In 1954, the Rome Club had warned us that had we continued to exploit creation irresponsibly, we would have faced serious consequences. And it took us many more years, up to 2015, to see all of the world's governments get together to save our planet. With a very small result, which was obtained, although we do seem to be aware. And now the most recent frontier is the one of emerging and converging technologies. That includes biotechnologies, nanotechnologies, digital technologies, and cognitive technologies. The convergence of these technologies makes them so powerful that they can destroy mankind. They can change DNA. Japanese scientist Ishiguro refers to our generation as the last organic generation, whereas the next generation may be the lithium generation or the mercury generation, or materials that the human body is made of. That's why we face a very, very delicate situation regarding the survival of all things human as we know them. That's why artificial intelligence, which has invaded the various contexts of life and which has become a topic we discuss on a daily basis, requires special attention. And ethics and innovation are both terms which underline how crucial it is to consider technology and innovation along with ethics. And all of us, all of the participants at this roundtable are all aware of this topic. As far as I'm concerned, I'd like to underscore one aspect, which is something I want to mention to all of you. Now, the words artificial intelligence are somewhat ambiguous. They can be interpreted in many ways, and we can no longer change these words because they are now part of our everyday conversations. But were we to identify the contents, the meaning of these words, it would be as if we referred to a wooden piece of iron. What does it mean? Nothing. Because intelligence is something which is linked inextricably to the human brain. Nothing artificial can be compared to the human brain. Also because development and evolution allowed Homo sapiens, after 6 or 7 million years, to become what Homo sapiens is. Plus, our rational intellectual dimension started appearing 100,000 years ago. Although the emotional side of things, which is also linked to animals, goes back to at least 200 million years ago. Now, why am I saying all this? Because that is what intelligence is. Without that evolution, without the body, it has no meaning. It has no meaning to say that intelligence is linked to the artificial, because the artificial is a human invention. And the identification which takes place through these words with the human sphere leads to very serious misunderstandings. That's why it's essential to understand that we are talking about an artifice which is the outcome of the human mind, human intelligence, and that's something we should rejoice of. We need to be glad that human intelligence has created such a precious artifact. Is it the most revolutionary artifact? I don't know. Well, when man started controlling fire, that led to a major revolution. The same goes for machines or electricity. Man was never lacking the tools he needs. It is through intelligence that we can create, produce, and develop. So from that point of view, it's important to underscore that the artifact that man builds, say the algorithm, cannot be a human body. The human body is emotional. 60 to 70% of the human body is emotional. The rest is rational. The human being is an emotional being which also reasons, not the other way around. Man isn't an entirely rational being with emotions. It's quite the opposite, in fact. For example, artificial intelligence will never have a subconscious. And that goes to show that we need to be very focused on the topic, but we have to avoid misunderstandings. Having said that, artificial intelligence is a very powerful tool that can do things that man can't, not with the same accuracy, not with the same power. That's why the crucial element in evolution and innovation is ethics. The crucial element isn't the artificial product. It is how human intelligence can use that tool, so much so that in 2000, when the ethical charter was signed at the Pontifical Academy for Life, and we signed it in January 2000, we refer to algorithms, based on a suggestion of Pope Francis, against algocracy, against the power of algorithms, the power of technique, which is something Heidegger had already warned us of, and Habermas, Virilio, and many other philosophers. Raspail talks about technique as the new and future religion, to condemn the exaltation of this artifice that we are raising to a divine level. Now, all of our phones have the logo of a bitten apple. And that apple, I think, brings Adam to mind. So what we're trying to do is say, well, if I eat that apple, I'll become like God. That's why it's so important to be aware. Artificial intelligence is a very powerful tool, but man has to continue to drive that car. Man has to continue to control the machine. In other words, we have to make sure that technology needs to be made human and not the other way around. That's the challenge we face. And together with our friends, together with the participants joining us today, we will be discussing this topic. And let me begin by asking our panelists to limit their comments to 10 minutes. And if you prefer, you can speak from the podium. And let me now begin by giving the floor to the lady present. That's natural intelligence there. So you're the only one and you deserve this privilege. So let me give the floor to Ms. Silvia Calandrelli, who is the Director for Sustainability and ESG at RAI, Italy's national broadcasting company. And we know how strong of a bond there is between artificial intelligence and communications. She was also the former Director of Culture for RAI, and she is very knowledgeable regarding this topic. Over to you, Silvia.
Allora, buonasera a tutti. Mi sento.
Good afternoon, everyone. For the very first time, I feel I'm a minority. So I'll take this opportunity to begin. I want to thank Monsignor Paglia. I'm very thankful and honored to be able to take the floor on this distinguished panel regarding a topic which is so crucial for the future of all of us. In 1891, Pope Leo XIII, in his encyclical Rerum Novarum, discussed the topic of conflicts linked to industrial development and the social disparities which existed at the time. And the words which introduced that encyclical are perfect for the revolution brought about nowadays by artificial intelligence and its ethical, social, and economic implications. AI, in the era we live in, I'll quote the encyclical, keeps us waiting, and it makes it difficult for wise men to think. It makes it difficult to have meetings of lawmakers, councils of princes, and people's gatherings. So much so, in fact, that there is no other issue which is as interesting for the world. A world marked by bloody clashes, which seems to be delicately balanced between new and extraordinary perspectives and just as new and potentially destructive risks. In recent years, generative artificial intelligence has been able to achieve, for the first time, systems capable of producing language, which is apparently no different from the one we humans produce, capable of generating images and videos, which are no different from reality, capable of writing complex IT codes to translate from a language to another and to make scientific discoveries and even revolutionize certain fields of science. AlphaFud, the program developed by Google engineers to rewrite protein structure in a matter of months, did the same work that with traditional methods would have taken human researchers many decades and major economic investments. However, artificial intelligence, also used in new weapon systems and social profiling, can also be used to produce IT and biological viruses to create and disseminate disinformation. The impression we have, which is quite clear, is that we aren't simply facing a single technology to be handled with care. What we're experiencing is a real game changer, and it doesn't only have an impact on technology, but it also requires systematic, ethical, and philosophical debate. It requires creating adequate legal and regulatory frameworks, and it requires a dissemination of knowledge and skills. In recent months, I was also asked to coordinate RISE technical group on artificial intelligence. And for the national broadcaster, the development of generative AI certainly has huge implications because it can change the way we produce many types of content, and because these changes require clear policies for our users who have to be able to recognize the origin and the nature of the information they receive. We have to work on the internal, in-house training of our employees, and we have to make strategic choices which are not banal at all. RAI, as a national broadcaster, has major responsibilities, more so than many of the other companies operating the sector. We are responsible for working on AI literacy, which is key when it comes to the broader IT literacy context, allowing the largest possible number of people to become skilled regarding their citizenship when it comes to knowledge and a more aware use of artificial intelligence systems. It is responsible for coming up with reasonable, transparent, and shared policies regarding the use of data and content, which represent a very valuable set of information, and it is crucial when it comes to the evolution of our country over the past century, and is linked to the generation of AI systems. It needs to be linked to the scientific, political, and cultural elements of our country to come up with a national and European policy in the field. Now, these responsibilities imply technical studies when it comes to the tools and their potential and criticalities, and it is also ethical, legal, and value-based. The ethics and philosophy of artificial intelligence in a matter of years have become a frontier, and it is now difficult to conceive a major corporation without specific experts in these fields. These are skills which cannot be improvised and which may represent the fine line between positive and dangerous uses of the systems we're building. Our choices in these fields need to be guided by shared values, which in turn require effective and transparency, discussion, and negotiations. These are topics which I believe deserve to be discussed more specifically. Nowadays, artificial intelligence systems have two types of especially insidious problems. On the one hand, we have biases, which the system inherits from its training corpus, and the hallucinations. In other words, the production of factually fake or incorrect information. Hallucinations depend on the fact that artificial intelligence and generative artificial intelligence produces plausible contents based on statistics and probabilities. But without specific corrections, it cannot produce verified content, for example, because they are based on a reliable database. And therefore, biases and hallucinations are two problems with very different characteristics. Hallucinations can lead to major mistakes, but they are more easily managed, especially if we recognize their origins and if we become capable of anchoring systems to factual reality, an aspect we are focused on very much. Whereas biases require a value-based assessment, and reflecting on values is never easy. For example, we are almost, and I underline almost, we almost all agree that we now refuse certain gender stereotypes, which artificial intelligence, generative artificial intelligence systems tend to use, because those stereotypes are present in their training corpus. But in many other cases, the situation is far more complex. For example, we know that given a number of questions, such as a political thermometer or relating to the US political situation, ChatGPT expresses positions which are closer to the Democrats than to the Republicans. Is it a bias? A U.S. Republican would say it is, whereas a U.S. Democrat would say it isn't. Grok, Elon Musk's artificial intelligence system, over the months went from more progressive answers to much more conservative answers. This political reconversion was undoubtedly the result of a high-level guidance work, the steering of the system by its programmers. And therefore, how should we steer artificial intelligence systems? Which values should they consider as a benchmark? Anthropic, another key company in the sector, suggested a form of constitutional AI based on rules which are based on very authoritative sources, such as the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and partly from a public consultation process, but which only involved U.S. citizens. A reliable constitution would probably require a global negotiation with the highest level of participation, transparency, and inclusion. But the very rapid developments of artificial intelligence, for the most part linked to the work of major private corporations, which are also managed based on the geopolitical interests of the major powers, don't seem to be compatible with the time required to have these types of public negotiations. Furthermore, the quick progress made in the development of smaller artificial intelligence systems, which can also run on medium-sized computers, makes controlling them very complicated. A limited number of major players create an oligopoly, but they are also more easily controllable. The birth of many medium-sized players can make the use of artificial intelligence more democratic and more widespread, but as in the case of nuclear proliferation, it can also multiply local risks, the ones represented by systems which aren't aligned to our values and which are created with dangerous goals. The things I mentioned are only a few aspects of a topic which is a lot more complex, which includes many other factors, including the focus on the so-called emerging proprieties of the major language models. It is not awareness, it isn't conscience, which is what Vincenzo Paglia said earlier, but undoubtedly In a few cases, the larger and more advanced systems behave in a way which is partly different compared to the forecasts of their very programmers. And sometimes they also make manifest some leaps in skills compared to smaller systems. And since the inner functioning of large language models based on their statistics and based on their probabilities and the huge number of statistics used, which is partly opaque, researching these unexpected results isn't easy, but it is crucial. It is a task which is part of the research area linked to the explainability of systems, and therefore to the exact understanding of their functioning principles. This also is something which needs to be encouraged and monitored by public agencies as a way of avoiding that the considerations of productive intelligence made by generative artificial intelligence platforms can overshadow the need we have of understanding how they actually work and which risks they may bear. These are tools that are being given an increasingly important role in the management of a number of crucial aspects for our societies. And therefore, thinking about these topics is something we are all responsible for. And the international and national policymakers have to create the necessary conditions so that this technology can be developed with the guarantees, transparency, and skills required. From my point of view, these are the things I take into account in my role as a RIDE director on artificial intelligence. But of course, it is only one piece of a puzzle which is a lot more complex. And opportunities such as today's are precious indeed, because they allow us to look to the puzzle from different points of view and with an increasingly broad outlook. These are topics which require long and hard work, which has only just begun. Thank you.
Grazie.
Thank you very much.
Grazie, cara dottoressa.
Thank you very much. Well, this first contribution shows a very, very complex issue. Unfortunately, for now, there's no regulation that can coordinate what is happening in this field in individual continents even. When you mentioned the verifiability, well, algorithms are produced by man, and every man, when creating an algorithm, is putting their culture, their politics, their perspectives in it, their intents. So no algorithm must be taken as is, without considering everything that lies behind it. So you must not believe in it without considering what the background is. And the first regulation that was introduced in this field, we proposed the term algorithmics, to say that when an algorithm can be ethical, because it must be verified. It calls for verifications, several verifications. Algorithms must be transparent, inclusive, driven by responsibility, by impartiality, by the reliability of the systems, by security and also privacy. But these principles have been accepted by a certain number of operators who are abiding by them. We are way far from a universal acceptance of such principles. That is why conferences like these should be more and more frequent by engaging data managers. So you are here on behalf of Rise State Television. So you are already on top of the chain. So there are still many spillovers to consider. And it's very difficult today to group together the main players in a common venue for a potential universal legislation. This being said, it is very important for those who are already applying rules to talk about ethics. So what human are we willing to protect? What's the common human that must include all the peoples of the earth? So now we'll hand the floor over to another distinguished player, economic player, Aurélien Hamel, who's the person in charge of artificial intelligence for Total. So in a nutshell, he's strategy and sustainability director, member of the executive committee, is a former teacher of law and governance at the Institut Études Politiques de Paris. So I will hand the floor over to him so that you can continue elaborating on this topic to get to a perspective that is as broad as possible and as shared as possible also internationally. Thank you.
Grazie. I'm going to speak in English. I'm sorry for that. Your Excellency, thank you for these kind words. Esteemed guests, it's a pleasure and an honor to be here today and share some perspectives with you. So I'm not a specialist, unlike what was just said, on artificial intelligence, but I work in a large energy company that does oil, gas, and electricity. And I wanted to share some perspectives on the implications of artificial intelligence and the ethics of artificial intelligence in the energy world. And that was said in the introduction. Climate change is obviously a major concern, a global societal concern today, and the implications of artificial intelligence can be for the best or for the worst. And I wanted to share some perspectives in this respect from the energy vintage point. First, let's just take a step back, and this is often said, access to energy is a way to lift the population from poverty. So access to energy is fundamental, and there is an economist who's a great specialist of energy history. His name is Václav Smil. His books are must-read, and he defined a threshold under which is an energy threshold, under which there cannot be any proper human development. And he bases his work, Václav Smil, on the Human Development Index of the UN, which is access to education, which is health, and which is wealth, which is GDP. And below 70 gigajoule of energy, which is the basic energy unit per habitant, countries cannot lift their population at acceptable levels of human development. Today, 4.5 billion people live below that level, and the rest of the population lives above that. So now the question is, how do you make energy accessible and at the same time, because this is the stake, reduce drastically CO2 emissions? And I wanted to offer this dual lens of what AI has to do with energy production, energy access, and CO2 emissions to try and get a perspective on whether or not this can have a positive or a negative impact on that world. And to do that, there's something I like to do, which is just go back to where the CO2 from energy comes from. Just today, you all know that humanity emits 55, 57 gigatons, billion tons of CO2 equivalent per year, and that goes into the atmosphere. Almost 40 gigatons, 40 billion tons, that's 40, come from energy. That's the bulk of that. And that comes from coal, oil, and gas. Now, if we go into the details, the main source of CO2 from energy today is from power production. So generating electricity worldwide emits 14 billion tons of CO2 per year around the planet. So that's number one in terms of energy and CO2. 74% of that CO2 comes from coal-fired power plants. The rest mostly comes from gas. Now the question is, can artificial intelligence have a positive or a negative impact on that? Likeliness is artificial intelligence will be consuming more electricity, a lot more electricity. And the stake number one is to make sure that where there is data centers, artificial intelligence training, that should be in places where electricity generated by renewables, nuclear electricity, hydroelectricity, gas as a supplement, and as less as possible coal. Now, will artificial intelligence make people consume more electricity? The answer likely is not, because artificial intelligence likely is going to be able to help improve energy efficiency. So likely artificial intelligence is going to have a positive impact on how much electricity you need to deliver a service to a house, to a shop, to a factory. And I'll give you one example on the improvements that AI can bring. In the power business we have renewable and gas-fired power plant. We have developed a model of weather forecast so as to improve the production of solar panels and wind farms. So you need to have very precise models of how the weather is going to be in the next hours, day, and weeks. And artificial intelligence is a huge boost, and we have programs in this respect so that we can make better use of the wind and solar resources to produce more electricity, or maybe, if there's going to be too much sun, store electricity in a battery and then release that at night. So artificial intelligence has this dual role of maybe it's going to be an issue for all of us because it's going to require so much energy, and if that energy emits too much CO2, that's going to be adding up to the problem we already face. And at the same time, it can have a very positive impact, and this is something we are experiencing in this respect. Now, the second source of energy-related CO2 emissions is transportation. Transportation is around 9 billion tons of CO2 per year. That's number two, after power. Transportation is cars on the street, trucks, ships, and planes. Cars are the majority of that. It's 60% of those emissions. So will AI have an impact on that? Well, today the stake in transportation is how to get rid of oil. Oil is what everybody uses today for transportation. The obvious replacement for light transportation is electric cars, EV cars. Artificial intelligence is not going to make people drive more, likely not. It's not going to make people choose a diesel or gasoline car instead of an EV car. It likely will have no impact on that. Now, what artificial intelligence can do is, while there is oil demand and cars run on oil, and today around the planet 90% of new cars sold are still gasoline and diesel cars, 85% today, I think. So long as you have oil in cars, you're going to have CO2. We produce a lot of oil, so you need to have less CO2 when you produce oil. And there's a very vivid debate, which is a legitimate debate and discussion on should large technological companies help oil and gas producers produce oil and gas. Now, that's part of the public debate. My take on that, and others may of course disagree, is that the answer should be yes, because you will make oil production more efficient. You can emit less CO2 when producing oil, so because you're more energy efficient. And I'll give you another example of what it can bring. We have an experience from digital. When we produce oil, we do drilling operations. So you drill to get the oil or the gas, and obviously there's always a risk when you do such an operation. We've used digital to have, for 20 years now, a system called the kick prevention system, so as to avoid kicks when you drill, so meaning the risks of really pressure in the wells. Digital has allowed to improve these operations. Artificial intelligence will allow to improve safety in oil and gas operations. Then obviously you need to reduce oil production when oil demand is going to be on the decline. And AI can play a part in this. Now, the third source of emissions is the industry and producing heat for the industry. Industry requires a lot of heat. Buildings require a lot of heat and cool. And in this respect, buildings can be made more efficient by the use of artificial intelligence. So that likely is going to have an impact, because the less you consume energy, the more efficient energy use is, the less CO2 there is in the atmosphere. And one last point I wanted to make around energy and CO2 is around oil and gas production. Oil and gas production, so just the fact of producing oil and gas, I'm not talking about using oil and gas in transportation, in heat generation, it does generate a lot of methane emissions. I'm sure a lot of you know that. Methane is a very powerful heating gas, greenhouse gas. It heats the atmosphere 80 times more than CO2 in the course of 20 years. The ratio is 28 times more, almost 30 times more in the course of 100 years. There are three main sources of methane today from man-made activity. One is energy, that's almost 4 gigatons CO2 equivalent. The other is waste, and the other is agriculture and breeding. In energy, we have embarked as a company on reducing methane emissions as much and as fast as we can. We've done that, reducing 55% of our methane emissions last year compared to 2020, and we need to continue to get to our minus 80% objective. We are part of coalitions that do that in the industry, called the OGDC namely. And here, digital and AI play a key role. Again, because there is demand in gas, and we are producing gas, you need to make sure that when you produce that, you emit as little as you can in the atmosphere. And AI has a positive impact. I'll give you two examples of digital and one of AI. Digital, we have installed a digital sensor on a drone to conduct methane leaks campaigns in our operations, which has allowed for the reduction of methane. I was telling you minus 55% last year. Another one is we are installing this year permanent detection equipment in our facilities so that we can all the time detect methane emissions. That's thanks to digital. Then we are working on adding up an AI layer on that. That AI layer will analyze in our assets where the methane emissions come from, when they arise in the production cycle, and you can replicate these learnings onto other assets and go faster, basically, in reducing methane emissions. So my takeaway from the energy perspective, and then I want to have a concluding remark on the human perspective, is that AI can have a positive impact. It will have a significant impact on energy demand. That needs to be carefully managed in terms of how you're going to feed energy to data centers and to AI training. And it can have a good impact on the way energy is used. Now, having said that, it goes back to the biases and the algorithms. I'll give you an example for power generation. If you generate power, the idea normally in a grid that does prioritize decarbonization is to go for renewables first. So you want to use solar and wind first in what we call the merit order of the producing assets you have in a country. And then you're going to use hydro, then you're going to use nuclear, which usually is a base in countries that have nuclear energy. Then you're going to use gas-fired power plants, and then only you're going to use coal-fired power plants, because this is in the order of CO2 emissions with each generation facility. Coal emits the most, renewables emit the least. Now, there's another way to have, that's an algorithm, that's a choice. So you need to program AI to have that algorithm. But there's another algorithm, which is the price. And actually, when you look at existing coal-fired capacity in many places, in Asia, in Europe, in Latin America, in Africa, in North America, producing electricity through existing plants that use coal to make electricity is cheap, actually. And that's the difficulty with coal. Coal is abundant. Coal is usually a sovereign resource. It is more protecting in terms of energy security than oil and gas from the perspective of many countries, and it is cheap to produce electricity as a feedstock. So when you have existing coal-fired power plants, in the cost merit curve, most oftentimes coal will be very competitive. Now if you add on a CO2 price on that, like in Europe for instance, then coal becomes less competitive. Again, that's an algorithm. And the question is, who's going to make the code of AI that's going to choose which asset at 5:47 p.m. today is going to generate electricity? Is the code going to be that's the cheapest one? Or is the code going to be that's the cheapest one taking into account the cost of CO2? Or is the code going to be that's the cleanest one? Or a combination of that? This is where programming AI is going to be key. And one last point I want to make is we need to embark people in this respect. As a company, we need to embark employees first and foremost. And one thing I've been telling the teams is a difficulty I face is that when I started working some time ago now, I got to learn my job because I had to 10 pages of documents, attend meetings, draft memos, and I had no artificial assistance to do that. A challenge we face today is making sure that the younger generation, who are starting working just now, will actually learn something. And if AI is widely used to replace some of the human decisions we make today, there is an issue as to how people are going to learn their jobs and how then are going to control AI. Because you can only control AI if you know what it is that AI is doing. If you don't, you're at a loss. I wanted to make that final remark, not to say that it's let's say a negative tone, but certainly that's a word of warning that we have embarked upon so as to try and train the, let's say, not so young staff, I'm maybe part of that, and the younger staff to learn how to use and master AI. Thank you for listening.
Grazie di cuore.
Thank you very much. And that just goes to show how a large company can use artificial intelligence to improve the quality of its production. And we're talking about an oil company in this case, but all major companies. Think of robotics. For all companies, especially in robotics, artificial intelligence can work miracles. The problem is, who is going to manage the complexity of all of these interventions? And unfortunately, what I note is that the political world is entirely absent. And when it comes to energy, there isn't very much attention being paid by those to actually have to understand how much energy is required to allow big data to work. Many, in fact, say that artificial intelligence requires a huge amount of energy to offer its services. That's why it's crucial to have an ethical approach in a broad sense of the term, so we can understand how we can govern this technology globally. Because on the one hand, this technology is very powerful, but it can also be very disastrous. So that's the challenge we face. And I remember when I met the successor of Bill Gates, the chairman of Microsoft after Bill Gates, and he said, well, at our center in Seattle, we are 50,000 engineers. And every week, we have to create something new just to stay on the market. Otherwise, we'll be swept away. We can do extraordinary things. For example, he said to me, the youngest engineers we have are creating tools to allow blind people to see and deaf people to hear, and they're doing it just for fun. So just think of what good we can do. But on the other hand, we can also generate monsters. What we engineers don't know is the limit, the boundary between the machine and the human. That's why we would require constant guidance so that ethics can warn us and make us understand how important it is to preserve the human side without making it technological as well. And therefore, I think that major corporations have a responsibility. They have to examine, and they have to continue to examine. The Rome Call for Your Ethics. The Rome Call for Ethics was signed by the Director General of FAO because through artificial intelligence we can combat hunger. And that's why it's especially important to hear different points of view. And therefore, let me now give the floor to Eric Salabier, a dear friend. He is a Dominican. And he has focused on the topic of artificial intelligence from the very beginning. He chairs the Human Technology Foundation, which is a network of researchers. And that brings us to another crucial point. We have to continue to have a dialogue, a constant dialogue with engineers and researchers who study artificial intelligence, because they are the ones who will create the tools which then will also be used by the major corporations. That's why it'll be so important to hear your point of view. That's why we have to continue involving engineers in this ethical discussion of ours. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Monseigneur Paglia. Excellences, Mesdames, Messieurs.
Thank you very much, Monsignor Paglia. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I'll be speaking in French. We are experiencing something truly revolutionary. Artificial intelligence is perhaps something revolutionary. Although artificial intelligence is something which has existed for quite some time, which is everywhere. And I'd like to ask those of you who use AI systems to raise your hand. Raise your hand if you use artificial intelligence. Well, a small minority, I'd say. Those who raise their hands are those who use artificial intelligence with awareness, because everybody else uses artificial intelligence too without being aware of it. That means that AI is everywhere, in all systems. It surrounds us. We all use it, even if we don't know we do. We're talking about energy today, and much like nuclear energy, artificial intelligence has challenges and questions we have to deal with. Will we use it for a better future, or will we use it to destroy our coexistence and to destroy the foundations of humanity? That's the question we have to ask ourselves. The link with nuclear energy is much more than a mere image, because whenever we use an artificial intelligence system, it expands very swiftly, exponentially, much faster than what we can imagine. So, when facing all this, the question is this technology something that can do good? And of course it can, because we all use it to do good things. But we have to be careful, because it may end up damaging humanity. So we have to understand how we can build a common charter, one based on notions which are acceptable to everyone in an increasingly pluralistic world. Plus, how can we rethink our institutions so that such a charter can indeed be applied? There are many pros, but many cons as well. And the first risk we face is the risk faced by human autonomy. Now, what do I mean by that? The problem is that we may end up allowing our thoughts and decisions to be controlled by the machines little by little. And ultimately, we may basically erode our economy and our ability to decide. For example, a physician who uses technology too often may end up losing his or her skills. An artist may end up limiting his or her imagination. This isn't science fiction. It's our daily life, in fact. It is what we refer to as cognitive offload, which is transferring our intellectual efforts from the human being to the machine. And of course, this transfer can be positive from a certain point of view. Think of what the printing press allowed us to do, thanks to which we were able to devote more of our time to understanding a text rather than learning it by heart. And similarly, artificial intelligence can replace our daily, routine, long activities so that we can focus on the essential things. But be careful. We cannot exaggerate. We should avoid becoming intellectually lazy, which isn't a vice, it's a desire to be more rationally effective. Why should we work so hard if a machine can do things better, quicker, and in a cheaper way? But what would that leave humanity with? What would a human being be without being able to remember, to calculate, to judge, or to create? These are all skills we need, and we have to be able to exercise them if we want to continue living free. This is a freedom we always talk about, a freedom we always want to have, although we are happy to give that freedom over to the machines. And that's the danger we face. The danger being giving our machines a major part of our humanity. And that would have consequences, even in the field of labor. The person who spoke before me said that there are some positive impacts. Our foundation works with companies, and we do see some positive things, but there are some more subtle impacts as well. For example, in some companies, the certain tasks can be automated, or certain assessments could be made through the use of algorithms. In fact, algorithms suggest certain types of employees be laid off. And then we also have shadow AI. All workers, maybe even you, go to work carrying ChatGPT in their pocket, and they do part of their job using ChatGPT, maybe secretly, but they do use artificial intelligence. Of course, we understand that this allows us to save plenty of time, but careful, because these are gray areas in which ethics isn't applied 100%. It is a gray area which is quite dangerous. For example, managing one's customers through a chatbot without admitting it, or researchers who use data without verifying them, or hiring employees by using an algorithm which may appear to be innocent while they never are, and because it may end up having an impact on our job without having an overall control. So it's not just a matter of the human beings linked to the machine. It's more the meaning of work which is changing. The skills that we value are no longer the same they used to be. The way we cooperate is no longer the same. So, as you can see, this is a topic that is important, and our foundation is working on it very much together with the ILO. In fact, we published a report on the topic, which you can download. And this topic really needs to be further discussed. It has to be understood, because work is changing, but we are incapable of training workers and students for their future jobs. We understand that schools and universities will be the next institution to be affected by artificial intelligence. Whenever we talk to professors, for instance, today I had lunch with a number of professors, many of whom complained that their students are increasingly using artificial intelligence without any kind of discernment to prepare for their exams or to do their homework. And that's a risk we face. Not only will we be losing part of the skills we should have acquired, but we're also losing the ability to structure our mind. So of course we have to continue working, we have to evolve to understand both the positive and negative impacts of artificial intelligence, but we will also have to build a framework through which we can use artificial intelligence, because once we understand its positive and negative impacts, we can ask ourselves, what should we do now? Should we publish a charter? Should we invoke some principles? That's fine, but keep in mind that all these limits don't have an international dimension, or they don't have one yet. We live in a world which is increasingly pluralistic, a world in which no universal charter would have the ability to impose anything on anyone, because none of them would come from a single culture. We're gathered here today, and we come from all different corners of the world. We understand that the West gives value to individual freedom, whereas Asia gives value to social cohesion. The South gives value to other principles, all of which need to be able to have a dialogue with one another without countering one another. As Monsignor Paglia was saying, there are some fundamental topics such as human dignity, the transparency of the more dangerous systems, the right to human review, the decisions made by algorithms, fairness in creating artificial intelligence. All of these are pillars upon which we can reach an agreement. That is certainly true, but these principles don't mean anything without an institution supporting them. And we have to admit that, unfortunately, the institutions we currently have some major limitations. The UN system, conceived in a world with physical borders, has now been overcome by these technologies, which are borderless. Therefore, we need a new architecture, something similar to the International Agency for Atomic Energy. Something similar, but devoted to artificial intelligence, a global system that can set a standard, that could coordinate the response to the global threats we face. And if the UN won't be able to express such an institution, well, then maybe we should come up with a group of countries who are willing, say the G20, to create such a movement. Now, we were contacted by a number of large corporations, and I'm sure that the Holy See could play a major role in bringing these entities of goodwill together. We face a choice. What will we decide to do? Will we accompany and create a framework for artificial intelligence, or will we allow these AI systems to develop in anarchy? It's up to us to make the choice. We have to decide whether or not we will have the political courage and the will to move forward, as we did for the atom. It'll be up to us to be far-sighted enough so that beginning today, we can start building an enlightened future, a future for human beings, helped and supported by artificial intelligence. Thank you.
Grazie, Eric.
Thank you, Eric. You mentioned a crucial topic. I really believe that unfortunately, politics seems to be very distant from this issue. For example, we reached an agreement on nuclear power. We reached an agreement for climate. And similarly, there needs to be an agreement, an international agreement for emerging technologies and convergent technologies, including artificial intelligence. Unfortunately, we are quite far from that. With the Rome Call for Ethics, we came up with a common manifesto, which many companies signed. But unfortunately, we are lacking a vision that understands the universal dimension of this very delicate topic. And we have an extra difficulty. Well, the major corporations, or that limitation is that the major corporations who really have power are all either in the US or in China. Europe does have an AI Act, and it's a significant one at that, but it was created without involving the companies, and therefore it doesn't have any effectiveness. And there, according to a saying, the US invents, China copies, and the EU regulates. So, well, we have to understand that a major division, a very divisive element, is that while Microsoft and other companies are private companies, Huawei belongs to the Chinese government. And this disparity creates major problems in terms of coming together, in terms of also protecting our data. That's why what Eric Selby was saying is so important. He was saying that we have to help our governments and institutions, we have to help international agencies to converge towards a common charter. Is that possible? Well, it has to be possible. Otherwise, we won't be able to have a dialogue, and therefore we won't be able to have a convergence. Of course, our cultures are different, but there needs to be a charter. There needs to be a lowest common denominator that governs who owns data, for instance. Because nowadays, those who own data can decide on the life and death of that data. There are no rules. And I remember that after Pope Francis talked to the G7 countries, I told him, well, Father, you have to talk to everyone, not just to the G7, because everyone has to be a part of achieving all this. So as you can see, our panel today is discussing a very important topic, and I'm very pleased to have this opportunity today to discuss this matter. Also because the sector in which AI is making the most progress is the military sector. The military sector, the defense sector, is the one with the biggest economic investments. That says a lot. That's why it's so important in this context to discuss the positive elements that this very advanced technology has. Now, let me turn to one of the biggest players on the scene, Cisco. Gianmatteo Manghi is the CEO of Cisco Italy. And I'm very happy to have him here because recently Cisco signed the Rome Call, the ethical manifesto for the ethical governance of this very powerful tool. Over to you, Gianmatteo.
Thank you very much, Monsignor Paglia. According to a research study carried by BBC, the LLMs, when giving us news, are wrong 45% of the times. They don't give us the correct answer or the correct information. Likewise, if by magic we could transform the whole volume of car traffic of the US, according to a research study, into autonomous driving tomorrow morning, the victims of car crashes will be reduced by 50%. So I believe that there's no such a thing as a technological innovation that represents the coexistence of risks and opportunities better than AI. And at the end of my contribution, I will go back to these two examples I've just made. Let me just say I'm very happy to represent Cisco at this conference. In this international peace conference, I would like to thank the community of Sant'Egidio for the invitation. And I'm also as happy to talk about artificial intelligence. Our mission as a company is to connect what is not connected, which is reflected in our commitment to act as a bridge, connecting the world through technology, through new technology, to create better opportunities for people and societies. We are staying loyal to our ambition, i.e. using artificial intelligence to fuel an inclusive future for everyone, a future where innovation, technological and digital innovation, is aimed at improving the quality of life of people. And everyone can actually reap the fruits of this benefit. That is why we are truly honored to participate, as Monsignor Parra was saying, in the Rome Call for AI Ethics, which we signed back in April 2024, which combines this multilateral approach, this multidisciplinary approach, with artificial intelligence, with technological innovation that is linked to artificial intelligence and contributes considerably to elevate the question of ethics that must go hand in hand with the same artificial intelligence. International cooperation in this field is key, as Monsignor Paglia was saying earlier, because we want to do our share, but unless we are enough, unless everyone is actually, or almost everyone is doing this, the risks will be too big compared with opportunities. In this framework, we're also cooperating with the Italian government in connection with the Mattei Plan in a project called AI Hub for Sustainable Development. Of course, targeted to certain African countries to create new opportunities for skills acquisition and training. We have just celebrated our 40th anniversary as a company, and over the course of our history, we have built networks that connect people and organizations all around the world. Today, our mission is building a new infrastructure for artificial intelligence, which combines the necessary performance to make it work with security. But all this is being done by integrating ethics and responsibility. There must be the highest priorities on the agenda of our production processes. What do we mean? What do we mean by responsible artificial intelligence? So with the progressive adoption of artificial intelligence, that must be embedded in our activities, business activities, public administration, individual people's activities. I guess it becomes essential to understand the challenges and risks that this entails. Well, responsibility is, first of all, asking ourselves, are we actually ready for artificial intelligence to become part of our lives? And we have to ask ourselves this question from a technological and from an ethical standpoint. Let's start with technology. The risks exist in the development phase when it comes to solutions, especially generative artificial intelligence. There can be a risk of theft or alteration of the models that are altered because their functioning is not that evident as it happens with other technological systems. The algorithms they run on are not that visible in terms of how they mimic human thinking. Well, this awareness linked to the use of these systems, the awareness that there are cyber attacks are also enhanced by artificial intelligence. In a study we carried out on hundreds of companies all over the world, it's present in less than half of them. Less than half of their employees, 49%. And 60%, we heard about shadow AI earlier, 60% of the employees don't know what 60% of the companies don't know what artificial intelligence systems their employees are using, especially when it comes to dealing with very sensitive information. Let's look at the executive abilities. Well, artificial intelligence, we believe firmly in this, can offer great opportunities, but only 4% of the organizations who have looked at are actually ready in terms of skills, security, concrete projects to draw benefits from it. We're just at the beginning, which means that there are two positive implications. The potential must be fulfilled yet, and we are perfectly on time to integrate ethics and responsibility in this great innovation. However, from a technological standpoint, 84% of the respondents said they suffered a cyber attack due to the use of artificial intelligence, because their intelligence systems were attacked, or because these attacks were made stronger by the use of artificial intelligence. This is true for the business world. We cannot expect much difference when it comes to public administrations or private citizens. It is pretty clear that training and skills development become key factors for the adoption and the development of artificial intelligence that is responsible. Let's now talk about ethics. What does it mean for us? Well, first of all, we began addressing the ethical implications of technological digital innovation way before artificial intelligence became such a relevant issue. amongst the principles that we have promoted, for example, the reduction of energy consumption, sustainability and circular economy, we have applied two in particular. We have them applied for 2 years: privacy by design and security by design. So all the solutions that we develop must have great respect for privacy principles, not only GDPR, but all over the world, because GDPR applies to Europe specifically, and they must be intrinsically safe and secure. Moreover, we declared that all our activities around the world must respect human rights. And in developing artificial intelligence solutions, we must integrate respect for human rights. So we have created a manifesto back in 2022 that is setting out all these principles we undertake to abide by. So transparency, equity, responsibility, reliability, security and privacy. So we had a chance to meet Monsignor Paglia. So we become aware of the Rome Call for AI Ethics. We realized that their principles were consistent with ours. So our principles have become stronger. So they've been elaborated on even better. So we signed this Rome Call in April 2024. Moreover, we developed an AI impact assessment, which is an assessment system of all the AI systems that we are developing or we are actually using, because we import them from the outside or from other companies, to make sure that they respect those principles. And only when they pass the test governed by human intelligence, so confirming that they're respecting those principles, we integrate that AI in our systems and we provide that to our customers and to our employees. The world is looking at companies and businesses to see if they are going to keep their promise when it comes to the development of AI potential, but responsibly so sticking to ethical principles, because at the end of the day, what really is at stake is our most precious currency, so trust. The conviction that we share is that in order for technology to truly bring benefits to mankind, it must be built on trust, because everyone could adopt it for the common good, their own good, and the good of our planet. This is not something that you can obtain at a certain point in time. Good governance is a journey, it's not a destination. It is a journey aimed at constant improvement. It is not a destination we can easily reach. So that's the commitment that is fueling all our actions. I've talked about ethics and technology as pillars of a truly responsible innovation. But I would like to talk about two more things which I believe to be as important. First of all, training. As I said earlier, mindful and responsible use of artificial intelligence is based on skills. And with our Cisco Academy, we have undertaken to train 25 million people all over the world on AI within 7 years, starting from now, because there's also a responsibility that lies with those who are using it, meaning using it profitably, creating benefits for people, bearing always in mind that the human being is at the center of everything we do. Moreover, we lead an AI consortium that wants to ascertain how AI has an impact on the labor market, to help people grow their skills depending on these big changes that are currently happening. So training, as I said, is my third point. My fourth point, on top of technology and ethics and training, is the importance of modern and safe infrastructure, modern secure infrastructure. Yes, has to do with technology, because there's no doubt that the necessary infrastructure to make these AI systems work, we heard about it earlier, must be high-performing, must be fueled also by energy. So they must evolve to become more and more efficient from an energy standpoint. But they must be secure, safe, and resilient. And I would like to connect the question of security with ethics, because I believe they are strictly connected, because they give a key contribution to building trust in technology. And only if there's trust in technology, you can actually adopt it widely, and you can draw benefits from it, hopefully for everyone. This should set in motion a virtuous circle, reinforcing its scope and the legitimate expectation of minimizing risks and maximizing opportunities. So in conclusion, ethics and innovation are not a contradiction in terms. They are the pillars on which our technological development is based, and they are strictly related. Ethics, responsible use of artificial intelligence, resilience, security, these are key factors to make sure that technological innovation turns into progress. So it turns into a growth of society in favor and at the benefit of everyone. These are the opportunities that allow us to connect with each other, to connect with many people, with many distinguished speakers, and to start dialogues that can truly lead to continuing with this approach. As the Rome Core has taught us, this must be a multilateral and multidisciplinary approach, where also the ability of critical thinking, philosophical elaboration, ethics, historical studies could help to lead technological development for the common good. And it's here in opportunities like these that we could make a difference. Thank you very much.
Grazie.
Thank you very much. What you said reminds us of the responsibility that great players have when it comes to artificial intelligence, but also what politics has to do. So that is, not doing much in this regard. So I would like to stress the responsibility of the organizations that are here, that have clear in mind the richness of this perspective. I would like to raise another point, the critical responsibility of religions and of societies at large. So all of us should experience this dimension with a critical attitude, not negatively so, but meaning discernment. Discernment of the many possibilities that are ahead of us, as well as the many dangers. For example, I'm very happy to say that 2 years ago, with all the leaders of global religions, almost copying the experience here at Sant'Egidio, we went to Hiroshima all together to sign this charter, this ethical charter on artificial intelligence. It must grow with the help of society. So even in society, responsibility towards this new humongous instrument must grow. So we need a mature, mindful attitude in terms of discernment and not only fear. So I want to reiterate, I'm not afraid of artificial intelligence. I am afraid of human idiocy. And this is what I would like to stress once again. So now, I will hand the floor over to Abu Al-Qasim Al-Dubai from the World Organization of Pan-Islamic Jurisprudence from Kuwait. is the first religious representative that takes the floor today, so the floor is yours.
In the name of God, the compassionate, the merciful, never before in human history has man's knowledge grown as much as his ability to reflect has diminished. Today we live in a time when artificial intelligence knows almost everything about the human sciences, while a fundamental question is being lost. And that question is, what should we do with what we know? The greatest danger threatening mankind today is not ignorance. It is not a lack of information, but rather it is an abundance without awareness, knowledge without a compass. We have collected data from the entire Earth into automatic algorithms that we call artificial intelligence. But we are almost losing the true meaning of intelligence. And despite all this, the present moment is not a time for fear. It is a time for responsibility. The same mind that created these technologies is the one that from the very first revelation was commanded to read, and I quote, "Read in the name of your Lord who created." End of quote. It is the invitation that unites all heavenly messages to read the universe and read ourselves, but with a gaze capable of grasping the truth, not just information. Praise be to God who taught man what he did not know, and who made the first word of revelation the word read. Read is a word addressed not to one people alone. It is addressed to all of humanity, to remind humanity that knowledge is a form of worship, and that reading is the way to understand creation and to understand the cosmos. Reading, in its most authentic sense, does not mean skimming over a text superficially, but meditating on it with intellect and awareness, on its words and on its essence. From the stage when a child learns its first letters, all the way to old age, as it contemplates the pages of life, reading remains an act of faith. From this perspective, we are now facing a new revolution in the history of knowledge. We're facing the revolution of artificial intelligence. The mind was created to be what most ennobles man above other creatures. It is the tool that distinguishes between true and false, between reality and illusion. God did not give man a mind so that he could become a machine that repeats what he hears. Artificial intelligence is not a new mind, but a shadow of our minds. It is a system built from our data. Artificial intelligence has learned from our texts, from our images, and from our words. And it reworks them to produce something that resembles thought without actually thinking. And this is the admission of its developers themselves. Artificial intelligence has been built on mathematical equations and precise calculations to predict the next word in a text based on what came before it. Therefore, artificial intelligence anticipates the word as a wave anticipates the point where it will hit the rock. But it does not do this out of consciousness or intention, but through learned repetition. Therefore, when we see it respond, when artificial intelligence responds with confidence, or when it writes with eloquence similar to that of humans, we must not be fooled by appearances, since imitation is not awareness. And prediction based on probability doesn't mean understanding the essence of a text. The real danger is not that the machine will become more intelligent. The real danger is that we will become weaker, that we will silence our minds in the name of efficiency and in the name of speed. Besides having no conscience, these systems can also hallucinate. And artificial intelligence hallucination would mean producing false information with total confidence, convincing those who do not verify it that it is true. Now, God forbids us to blindly follow what we do not know. When he said, and I quote, "Do not follow that of which you have no knowledge, hearing, sight, and heart. All of these will be questioned," end of quote. This is clear proof that humans must always rely on their own intellect and senses, without blindly following other humans, let alone machines that have no spirit and have no awareness, that have no conscience. A machine which, again, has no spirit and no awareness. The use of artificial intelligence should neither be condemned nor idolized. It has to be assessed based on our ability to preserve the role of the mind, which remains the responsible subject, the responsible entity. Now, this is an important point. Major studies conducted by MIT, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, the leading university in technology, have shown that total reliance on certain artificial intelligence tools completely weakens brain activity and reduces the depth of our thought. Whereas those who begin a task with their own reflection, using one's brain and only then uses artificial intelligence, maintains a more active mind with more solid thinking. All religions state that the machine has been created to help us think without replacing us in our thinking. And from the point of view of faith, artificial intelligence can be an instrument of both good and evil at the same time. When used rightly, artificial intelligence becomes an extension of man's good work. But when AI is used for chaos or harm, it reflects his arrogance and dark side. Science per se is neither guilty or innocent. Intention qualifies it. Work and God will see your works, is what God told us. And here lies the essential difference between man and machine. Since the machine has no intention, nor does it have a conscience to guide it. No matter how advanced these technologies become, they will always remain devoid of feelings, of moral conscience, of sincerity of intention. They may be able to converse with us, but they won't be able to love us. They may be able to calculate, but they will not feel mercy. And even if one day we achieve general artificial intelligence, in other words, machines capable of learning any discipline and to make independent decisions, without human intervention, these machines will never have what human beings have, namely spirit and heart. Therefore, if we want to build machines without spirit, machines that can decide, we must at least program values and morals into them so that they become instruments of peace and not of domination. And this is present in the messages of all religions. The goal these machines have to have is to disseminate peace, not domination. For this reason, it is necessary to involve religious leaders and thinkers of all faiths in the drafting of ethical codes for AI, since technological development without morals inevitably leads to evil. Therefore, we must not lag behind science. Although speed cannot replace our moral compass, progress does not only lie in building tools, but also in the righteousness of our direction. And God wanted the mind to guide man's choices, along with the responsibility that comes with it. Not for the machine to guide the mind. This is why the pursuit of knowledge is a privileged path towards God. Today, the most precious asset is not technology. It isn't the machine, but the awareness that guides it. Every algorithm is a reflection of who we are. And if mercy prevails within us, it will reflect it. If greed prevails, it will reproduce it. The responsibility lies not with the codes or programs or with the algorithms. Responsibility lies with the man who creates them. Let us remember that the first word in the sacred history of knowledge was the word read. Read. It wasn't the word memorize. It wasn't the word copy. God told us to read, because reading is a conscious act, not a passive one. Reading is meditation, not surrender. And before I conclude, I wish to reiterate the importance of involving religious representatives in the drafting of ethical laws governing AI. And I hope that today's meeting will be a first step towards including these values before we lose this opportunity, before we become lost in artificial intelligence without a moral compass. Because without a moral compass, artificial intelligence will be used to create evil or to interfere in our decisions as human beings, and which will be used for evil and not good. And we ask Almighty God to give us mercy in our hearts and to bless all of our efforts to give all human beings their dignity and to transform this technology into a bridge leading us to a deeper knowledge of God without it becoming a wall that separates us from God. Thank you.
Grazie.
Thank you. Thank you for making us remember the depth of the religious dimension and to understand the dignity of man. Shukran. Thank you. He received plenty of awards from European universities. He has written over 50 books. So thank you very much that man is at the center of creation and not the other way around. Now, before I give the word to a friend, Oded Winner, I do want to mention that we will have some time for some questions. And if you raise your hands through our natural intelligence, we can see you and give you a microphone so that you can make a comment or question. Now I'd like to give the floor to Mr. Wiener of the Chief Rabbinate of Israel. He's an old friend of ours, an old friend of these meetings of ours. And I'm happy to give you the floor as a way of summarizing the vision of our three Abrahamic religions have on this topic. And these are the first three religions to sign the Rome Call for AI ethics in the presence of Pope Francis. And this underlines the importance that faith has even in this technological sector. It's a way of saying that man has to be the Lord of creation. Man has to help everyone, men, women, but also the environment, to be a wonderful home for all of us, in peace and brotherhood among all. Over to you, dear Wiener.
Thank you, Archbishop Falia. I have to consider to change my family name because according to alphabetic order, I am always the last one. But on the other hand, I am the last speaker, so everyone is satisfied. So you can cheer up, I am the last speaker. Sorry.
The friendship privilege.
You can say it after me. Anyhow, actually with such a brilliant speaker, who need AI? You know, we heard these wonderful speeches. Today, we don't need the AI. Anyhow, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your patience. And before we shall start, I would like to pay tribute to the community of Sant'Egidio, our host. I have had the privilege of participating in several conferences organized by the Sant'Egidio community, and there is no question of their significant contribution to awareness and understanding among religions through productive dialogue and individual face-to-face meetings between leaders from the various religions. This important conference expresses the desire that we all share to use dialogue to bring about an exalted and better world for the benefit of the entire human race. There is no doubt that the topic we are discussing today, AI between ethics and innovation, building the right balance, is a fascinating and subject that is relatively at the beginning of its development. It has tremendous potential for humanity, but also many risks, if it is used for problematic purposes. There are still so many aspects that we do not know about AI, and there is an urgent need to investigate and learn more about its full range of possibilities. Let me tell you a short story. My daughter saw me sitting and writing and asked me, "Why are you writing so much?" I told her that I was preparing my address for a panel on AI. So my daughter said to me, "Then why are you bothering? Ask AI to prepare the speech for you." I told her that I was not going to do so for two reasons. The first one, I think that it's important to exercise your brain and memory from time to time. The second reason, what if one of the other participants in the panel asked AI to prepare a speech for him on the same topic? You will have to hear two identical speeches, so it's better not to ask AI. So far, we have heard instructive lectures on the subject, which has enlightened us to understand the enormous importance of the technological development in every field enabled by AI. Also about the danger of serious ethical problems on the uncontrolled and unsupervised use by AI, about the scope of destructive consequences of which we will still do not know enough. For the sake of illustration, I will give you some very basic technological examples, not really AI, from our daily lives, which have influenced us greatly and changed our behavior patterns of many years. Which of the young people, not only here, around the world, knows more than 10 phone numbers by heart? It turns out that today there is no need or desire to make an effort to remember phone numbers, since all of the numbers appear in our memory on our mobile phones. And with the push of a button, we can reach whoever we wanted. Years ago, we memorized dozens of phone numbers by heart. Our family, friends from class or from the neighborhood, and all the phone numbers of our girlfriend. For me, it was very easy because I only had one girlfriend, which I am married to, my dear wife, Tzipi. By the way, this weekend we celebrated our 48th anniversary. So, today this ability to remember phone numbers has almost disappeared, and we barely remember our own phone numbers. And another example, we used to know how to find our way and find places and addresses everywhere, in the city and in the countryside, since we knew how to read a map and how to navigate. Today, we simply put the address in Waze or Google Maps and we arrive. Of course, the above examples are not exactly AI, but they are simplistic and very basic, and they touch on the essence of the important and fundamental question that our panel discussed. We are still in a relatively early generations of AI, and binding international laws have not yet been established that would determine the limits of use and development. Already today, more and more jobs are disappearing, being replaced by AI, leaving behind great people who excelled in their work. This phenomenon is already leading to a massive unemployment and serious financial problems for many families. Every day we hear about new developments, robots that look and react like humans, drones that perform complex tasks, etc. We have not time now to go into the whole problematic use or issue of the profound impact on democracy and elections through boots that can change the public opinion and the election results. We heard what happened in the state, we heard what happened in many other countries with the boots, so there is a real risk. The situation could soon make it difficult for us to distinguish between reality and fake and between lies and truth. We must also mention the ability of the individual to influence the whole world through AI technology. Who hasn't heard about Bill Gates, Mark Zuckerberg, or Elon Musk, or AI tools like ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, and many others? And of course, AI search engine dedicated for creative content, art, music, and more. By the way, 20 years old innovator Avi Schiffman recently bought for $1 million the largest campaign for AI product, which he developed and took over all the subway platform in New York with more than 11,000 ads inside the cars and 1,000 posters on the platform, only for $1 million. In conclusion, we find ourselves standing at the crossroad of unparalleled opportunities and challenges, where innovation potential to shape our future is nothing short than extraordinary. AI offers the promise of revolutionizing industries, healthcare, and in fact, in every issue. But it also presents us with profound ethical, social, and economic challenges. The Jewish view towards AI is in general welcoming, providing appropriate safeguards are present that do not endanger the individual life. Jewish ethics allow for a positive attitude to scientific innovation, recognize that these endeavors are at the heart of humanity, while acknowledging that every innovation has its potential danger. These risks are accepted as long as the necessary steps are taken to prevent undue harm from being done. The essence of man is to improve and better the world that God has created and entrusted to us. To face these challenges, we propose the creation of an alliance between technology companies and leaders representative most of the ethical tradition of the world. Religious leaders must be also at the forefront of all endeavors to demand that ethical controls and appropriate safeguards are taken. On a personal note, I would like to take this opportunity once again to express my appreciation to our distinguished hosts from Sant'Egidio, who are an endless source of inspiration in their struggle for justice, diversity, and world peace. Thank you very much.
Grazie, Odette. Davvero.
Thank you very much, Odette. A really smart and intelligent friend. Intelligent because, to pick your girl, you used emotion and not artificial intelligence, and you got it right. So all the best for your anniversary. Well, your final plea is reminding us of the importance of promoting alliances around this topic. It is not possible to face this new technology separately or individually, so it is essential that all sciences agree to save what is human, to avoid that technology becomes the leader of man. I still remember the emotion of the concern I shared while visiting one of the most important buildings held by Microsoft, so the data center. So you can really see that they are keeping tabs on the whole world. So those who own data are actually controlling everyone. Hence, the humanistic, religious, political dimensions, the scientific dimension, and also the industrial dimensions are particularly important. And I guess that this is one of the frontiers that we'll have to cross over the next few decades. Now, we'll hand the floor over to our last speaker, who comes from Indonesia. He is a former minister, Rudiantara. He was a minister of communication and IT from the Republic of Indonesia. He played several roles in this field, the field of technology. So I would like to invite him to close this panel with his contribution. Thank you very much.
Grazie, Monsieur Vincenzo Paglia. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Peace be upon all of us. Sia pace e benedizione a tutti noi. Your Eminence, Excellencies, distinguished colleagues, and dear friends. Before I begin, I would like to share a moment that reflects the spirit of our gathering. Can someone help me with the slide, please? Here we are. Pictures speaks thousands of words. And I think we have AI dimension as well here. We can project, we can estimate how long will it take the meeting between the two gentlemen. But we cannot predict what the professors Nasaruddin Umar, who at the time served as Grand Imam of Istiqlal Mosque and now serve as a Minister of Religious Affairs of the Republic of Indonesia, will kiss the forehead of the Pope. That is, we cannot take it into the part of AI because it's part of emotion. For us in Indonesia, this image represents more than interreligious harmony. It embodies mutual respect and moral conviction. It reminds us that respect and compassion must always transcend belief, that the true strength lies in the ability of honor one and another. In the same spirit, I'm honored to join this forum and to affirm that people must remain at the center of the progress. In this era of artificial intelligence, Technology must serve as our instrument, not our master. It should never define our future. Its impact depends on the choices we make as individuals and as societies. In Indonesia, more than 200 million people live across 17,000 islands and speak over 700 languages. Our challenge is to remain connected both digitally and morally. The digital economy should go beyond mere transaction. It must empower entrepreneurs, support smallholders, farmers, and ensure equitable access to knowledge, opportunity, and prosperity for all. Artificial intelligence evolves faster than regulations, which is why ethics and education must guide its development. Innovators must embed ethics into every design and decision. The late Pope Francis called this Algor ethics, a moral compass for innovation that is human-centered and just. Citizens, too, must strengthen their digital literacy to combat misinformation, protect privacy, and use technology responsibly. In many parts of the world, including my own country, this remains a challenge. Indonesia Digital Literacy Index stands at about 3.5 out of 5, meaning that the average citizen is roughly two-thirds ready to navigate the digital world responsibly. This progress is encouraging, but it reminds us that digital maturity is not only about the skill, it's about values. Around the world, faith-based institutions remain among the most trusted and far-reaching community networks. They nurture not only spiritual life, but also education, compassion, and social progress. In Indonesia, the role is evident across 800,000 mosques and prayer halls, and more than 50,000 Islamic schools, including 43,000, we call it pesantren, or Islamic boarding schools, and 5,000 Muhammadiyah schools, which together educate over 3.5 million students each year. Alongside them, thousands of Christian and Catholic schools in Indonesia, and I believe plus 100,000 or millions around the world, play an equally vital role in value-based education. This interfaith network provides a strong foundation for advancing digital and AI literacy, guided by ethics and empathy. The impact extends beyond education. Studies show that improving digital literacy directly increases national productivity and GDP per capita. According to the World Bank, a 10% rise in digital access can lift GDP by up to 2%. A reminder that investing in digital skill also drives inclusive economic growth. If every mosque, church, and school integrates ethical digital education into its program, we could prepare a generation that uses technology wisely and responsibly. One that builds innovation with both intelligence and conscience. That is how technology uplifts people, strengthens communities, and creates a foundation for shared prosperity. As the Vice Chairman of Dewan Masjid Indonesia, or Indonesia Mosque Council, I have seen how mosques can become a center of empowerment and economic powerhouses, not only for prayer, but also for learning, innovation, and entrepreneurship. One of our flagship programs is Rumah Wirausaha Masjid, or Mosque Center of Entrepreneurship, which help communities develop local business, connect to supply chains, and access digital markets. Beyond that, We are currently exploring ways to expand to the economic and social role of mosques. In many parts of Indonesia, mosques include its space that can be used for community activities. This space can be purposely redesigned to host small-scale community enterprises, from kiosks and convenience outlet to digital marketplace managed by the residents themselves. More importantly, it would create tens of thousands of jobs, strengthening local supply chain, and circulate income within communities that need it most. This spirit of empowerment aligns with the Church's call for an economy of fraternity, where progress serves people and not profit alone. Our shared aim is simple: to narrow the gap between those who have and those who have not, while upholding dignity, fairness, and peace. Ladies and gentlemen, let us remember that technology has no conscience, only humans do. The future will not be defined by artificial intelligence, but by authentic intelligence. Our capacity for empathy, humility, and shared purpose. May this forum remind us that economic growth without solidarity is hollow, and innovation without ethics is blind. Let us therefore work together, Muslim, Christians, believers of all faith, policymakers, and innovators, to ensure that we remain profoundly human in the age of AI. Thank you very much. Grazie. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. May peace and blessing be upon all of us.
Thank you very much.
Well, as you can see, we have concluded our round table. We have touched plenty of different topics. Now, being mindful of time, we already have two questions directly for Aurélien Hamel. And since he has to leave us because he has a plane to catch, just give us some quick answers to the questions on climate. Thank you.
I can go there. Sì, grazie. Sorry, I have to catch a plane, which is the last one to Paris. I have two questions from the audience. The first one is on the pace of AI growth may outpace the pace of renewable low-carbon energy addition. And the question is, does the benefit of AI is going to outweigh or not, or underweigh really, the cost of AI to the environment in terms of energy? I must say, to be very humble, I don't have the answer to that one. I think a lot of that will depend on efficiency gains in learning, in training models for AI, and on where data centers and training centers are located. There are places today where the growth in electricity is mostly lower carbon than the existing grids in place. There are places, however, in other countries where the growth in electricity generation is both gray or black, coal, heavily coal dependent, and renewable. The best example is China. China is adding the most renewable capacity every year compared to the rest of the world, and it's also adding the most coal-fired power plants to the grid. And China is really, I think, the whole question mark in this question. So efficiency gains are going to be very, very important. And even in a given country, if you look at the USA, where you're going to be locating data centers is going to be important. Any state is not like any other state. There are places in any one country that are better than others, depending on how the grid is functioning. The other question, I think, is broader. It's in Italian, so sorry, my Italian is not perfect, but I think I get the most of that. It's around the targets of maintaining global heating, average global heating below 1.5 degrees or 2 degrees, and namely Pope Francis mentioned, stance and commitment around that, and namely also Antonio Guterres, the UN Secretary General, commitment behind the need to stop fossil fuel exploration and expansion. I think this is the gist of the question. I hope I got the Italian correct. Sorry if that's not the case. In this respect, it's a very long question, complex one, but I'll try to be very quick. Today, when you look at energy trends, and I'm not talking about, we do scenarios, I'm talking about the International Energy Agency's scenarios. The most reasonably optimistic scenario of the IEA is called the STEPS scenario. It is analyzing evolution of energy demand, coal, oil, gas, everything, up until 2050, looking at current trends with slight improvement of electric vehicles penetration, less coal in the grid. If you look at that scenario, which is a slightly optimistic scenario, and we have one which is pretty similar, you have a growth of oil demand until the mid of the 2030s, early 2030s, then a slow decline. Today the oil demand is 100 million barrels per day. That's the oil demand and supply. That scenario of the IEA says in 2050 it's going to be 90 million barrels per day. That's one thing. When you compound that with another factor, which is that if you do not invest in oil and gas, there is a natural decline of production, which is 7-8% per year. Meaning if you stop investing in oil and gas today, for a company, the production goes to zero in around 20 years, slightly less than that. So it is true that it is emitting too much CO2, and the question mark is to everybody, how fast can we go and how much can we accelerate EV penetration mostly, which is key, and producing heat with low carbon energy, and finally converting or not opening new coal-fired power plants. These are the three key priorities, frankly, for the energy system. Frankly, the oil and gas industry can adapt because lowering the investment will rapidly lower the production because of the decline rate. So I could elaborate a lot more on that. I'll be quick because there are other questions, and I'm sorry I need to go, but thank you again for these questions.
Je réponds maintenant. Merci beaucoup. Alors, j'ai effectivement des questions aussi, mais
I will answer too. I've got lots of questions, but I have to catch the same plane as my colleague, so unfortunately we'll have to leave. I'm sorry, I'm really sorry. As you can see, we use a lot artificial intelligence, but we are always limited by our physical body, so I can't be in two places at the same time. So this would call for our holiness, joking aside. So I got two questions, and I will try to give brief answers. The question is how to help professors support young people in the use of artificial intelligence in an ethical manner. Well, the first thing is the following. We must use artificial intelligence for our own interest. And what's our own interest? It's not that of getting good marks at an exam or to pass a test, but to find a job when you leave university. So I guess the key element is precisely this. We should provide our young people with solid skills that unfortunately are lasting shorter and shorter, but to teach young people to learn, because this is the legacy they're going to be left with. They have to learn about discernment. They have to use emotional intelligence that will be useful for them, not only professionally, but also personally, because they are citizens. They're going to be citizens. We talked about misinformation campaigns. Well, this discernment is something that young people must have within them if they want to grow in humanity. These are the criteria that the professor, regardless of the subject they're teaching, must maintain when they promote artificial intelligence. Well, from a methodological standpoint, and we'll conclude by this, I believe that there are many ways, many useful ways to use artificial intelligence. But we must always pay attention to one thing. Students must always be the ones to own their actions. They must not delegate things to the artificial intelligence. They must start a dialogue with it. For example, when they have to do homework or when they have to write an essay. So this could be interesting. So we must teach young people to start a dialogue with artificial intelligence. Some people were saying today that young people talk to the artificial intelligence tool as if they were talking to their friends. So we should teach them to speak to it with discernment.
Désolé de vous abandonner.
I'm sorry, but I have to leave.
Allora, il nostro moderatore ci ha abbandonato.
So our moderator has abandoned us? No, sorry. So we are going to self-manage this panel.
La domanda è rivolta a me e
So the question for me is for the radio and television. They contributed to disseminate the word and the religious information. So will artificial intelligence play the same role? So I believe that artificial intelligence will play an important role, and it will depend on the way we train it. It will have an important role in terms of education and training. What do I mean? Let's think of language learning. So the many artificial intelligence systems that are out there offer an excellent support for teaching languages. So we know that artificial intelligence tools can translate texts, audios, and videos with great accuracy with no mistakes. And they can they can offer important sources for language training in basically every language in the world. So it will depend on the use we're going to make of artificial intelligence in the field of education. One of our speakers was saying that earlier. So we are in a very tricky situation in the school and university world. We've got students and undergraduates that are using AI, but they're using it in two different ways, basically. As a support when doing homework, and as a replacement. So they actually delegate everything to artificial intelligence. And this is happening in university tests as well. Even if there are systems to understand if they have used AI for passing a test. Well, these systems are more and more easy to bypass. So it's difficult for a teacher to understand if the test was taken by a human being or by AI. Well, what does this mean? That we've got a tremendous work to do in the field of education of training. We have talked about AI literacy that must concern the whole society and citizens and teachers as well. Schools and universities are the training centers par excellence, so they should consider the question of artificial intelligence, be mindful of its use, and make sure that artificial intelligence is a support for teaching activities. It must be an extraordinary support, as we see when teaching languages. It can be an important support, for example, in the use and in the development of mathematics, because artificial intelligence can make calculations way faster than the human mind. So if you use it as support, it makes sense. But to do that, we have to be trained. We must have knowledge and skills in the field of education. Otherwise, there will be a strong dichotomy between the world of young people using it as a habit and, of course, grasping immediately not only its potential but also convenience. That will have the Latin text translated directly by AI, or as the speaker was saying, I will ask AI to write my speech. and the world of trainers that are not so mindful of the potential that comes with the use of artificial intelligence. What do I mean by this? Let's use it as a tool to support our creativity, to support our learning, to support the possibility of being confronted with different sources. But let's study it, let's elaborate on it, otherwise it will get out of control. It is partly happening already, and if it gets out of control, we will have problems in terms of values, in terms of ethics, but we will have problems in the awareness of our young people. Thank you very much.
Sì. Due domande sul lavoro e quindi...
I've got two questions. In the early years of AI, use for mass surveillance was feared, especially in China, but there are cases in Hungary that, according to Ruben Di Francesco, asked the question, might be an infringement of the AI Act, or anyway, individual privacy. Well, this is a very important question. Well, I've tried to point out that there are, first of all, principles to abide by. And if you want these principles to become universal, they must be translated into regulations, and the AI Act goes in this direction. And the rules on privacy and on the AI Act already allow us for prohibiting the recognition of people and the improper use of data linked to said recognition. We turned this into an important principle in the development of certain solutions. I will make a practical example. We've got a video conferencing system that recognizes people. There's many colleagues. We don't know each other, so they immediately give a name to a face. So they can even provide information about the professional profile of colleagues. But this is on a voluntary basis. You can decide if you want to share this information with your colleagues or not. So if you want to make your personal information visible or not, either internally or in video conferences with external partners. I understand the importance of respecting privacy, but principles and rules are extremely important to make sure that everyone is on the same page when it comes to an ethical conduct. The second question is asked by Massimo Mercuri. When faced with inevitable loss of millions of jobs due to artificial intelligence, what could the countermeasures to take be? It's very difficult to ascertain if AI will actually contribute to create more jobs than those that will be lost. There are different estimates, different studies that come to different conclusions. But there are two things I would like to say. What happens is that during a transformation, even if more jobs are created than the ones that are going to be replaced by artificial intelligence, there is a time of crisis. And this time of crisis must be sustained with economic labor policies that prevent excessive social costs from being incurred by the people that are affected by these changes. So I'm optimistic. I believe that we could create as many jobs, as many professional profiles in the field of high tech, including artificial intelligence. But in any case, we need policies to help people convert their skills, and we need policies to support them in this transformation process. But there's also another thing I would like to say. In the course of economic history, we have witnessed a better treatment of workers. There was no such a thing as pension allowances years ago, or holidays, or sick leaves. People would work every day. Then Sundays came. Well, my parents would work on Saturdays, then weekends came. So we made it possible for democratic countries to have increased productivity, realized through innovation, and that this would be distributed between profits and salaries meant as new jobs and more access to employment on the part of people, especially women. Only 53% of women in working age are actually working in Italy, so the employment rate is low. So this distribution is virtuous. So increasing productivity, profits, salaries, work. But with artificial intelligence, which is a great innovation, we could further distribute this increased productivity between profits, salaries, and time. So a society that is returning time to people, more time to people, to look after their children, look after more after their children, after their parents, after their neighbors, to do volunteer work, or maybe to cherish their interests, cultural, philosophical interests. There's nothing bad in thinking of a society that, thanks to technological innovation, can reduce the time devoted to work and devote this time to something else. Thank you. I have 3 more questions. One, I don't understand the meaning. I can't read what Fulvio De Martino said. Maybe we could hear from it. Christoph Spreng. Here too, I don't understand the question. So the last question is regarding elderly people. Filippo Di Blasi. Startup companies that offer company services to senior citizens that are alone. Questions and reflections on this topic. So when it comes to senior citizens, well, the question of artificial intelligence calls for attention. For example, I've mentioned at the beginning Ishiguro, a Japanese scientist, who built his own clone, so exactly like him. And 2 years ago in Japan, I saw nurses, perfect ladies, that were actually robots, that were keeping company to elderly people in Japan that are alone. So it's the country that has the highest number of senior citizens. Well, solutions like these might create quite a few problems when technology wants to make up for the lack of humanity. At the same time, IBM has been exploring how artificial intelligence could help elderly people in their daily tasks. Even, with their clinical records. This could be useful in Italy as well. Law 33 on senior citizens sets out that with artificial intelligence, all senior citizens can be reached, none excluded, to have them monitored, to have them treated. Just the other day, we heard the news of an old lady who had passed 5 years ago and no one realized it. So her home was being seized, so they forced entry into her home and they found her mummified after 5 years. Well, in this case, through artificial intelligence, we can definitely guarantee support. For example, there might be problems with privacy because the privacy watchdog doesn't want to disclose the personal data of senior citizens. We convince them that in this case, it is actually appropriate to have their data, to have them diagnosed right away and to start treatment accordingly. The problem is, this new technology is calling for additional attention in how it is organized. Well, I believe that there are already many concrete ways to help the many problematic realities. For example, through robotics, there are people that can finally walk with the exoskeleton, or the same with hearing or vision. So the problem is to understand, to see it, to understand it as an instrument. The first time Pope Francis met the new president of Microsoft, I remember I escorted him into the room. And the Pope told me, "Palia, but who's this guy?" And I tried to explain who he was, and I said, well, Pope Francis is a lawyer defending immigrants free of charge in the US. And he said, let's go. So to underscore the humanistic dimension, why am I telling you this? Because for the first time, unlike the past centuries, it was science or technology that asked for the help of ethics. It wasn't the other way around, as it often happens. It wasn't religion to impose morality. Well, in this case, it is exactly the opposite. It happened exactly the opposite. This is just to say that we can't leave this technology to the experts only. And I will make another example. Brad Smith, 4 years ago, told me we are currently testing a new invention. I think it will be ready by 2030 that will completely change the face of artificial intelligence. 2 years later, he told me, well, we got there 8 years early, and it was ChatGPT. And he told me we have reached a level of technological development without the necessary legal support, legal and humanistic support. And this is one of the problems we must realize. The speed of technology, so the speed of innovation, and the short-sighted politics is investing enormously. So, and technology is way ahead. Way further than a new vision of planetary humanism. So in this sense, there's a problem regarding universities themselves. So I'm happy that the manifesto of the Rome Call for AI Ethics was signed by 250 universities around the world, because it is key to have all sciences reflect on an issue that has a huge impact on our daily lives. And this is encouraging every one of us to be always up to speed with the latest information and innovation. And the delicate question of control, and I will make another example, is also important. In 2019, in Hong Kong, there were demonstrations for civil rights. I don't know if you remember. And the president of Microsoft told me, well, all the protesters with face recognition are all registered. Those who have their data have absolute power over them. So you just have to block their credit cards, and this will end. And he also added, Trump asked for data, but we are a private company, so we didn't grant access to data. That is why I believe it is essential to have politics step in, even jurisprudence, to regulate this new power. And if we think of what's going to happen shortly, so momentarily, in space, in 5 to 6 years, according to experts, we might go to the moon with no problems whatsoever. So technological developments are huge, but there are no regulations yet. A private citizen, whatever their name, if having enough money, can send 7,000 satellites around the Earth with no regulations or rules whatsoever. If we want to change a window in our flats, well, you know, how many fulfillments we have to take. There are people that can send up in space 7,000 satellites that obviously keep tabs over us, that know everything about us, that control us. But, you know, our mobile phones are a way to give our data to those who have control. And we don't know what they're doing. And we can't even know what they're doing. That is why this theme calls for attention. Calls for attention from every field of society, politics and the awareness of individual citizens or companies that must take responsibility, and communication agencies even. It's a horizon that must kindle reflections, knowledge, awareness in all of us, critical thinking, and also helping us make ourselves heard, because this is a dimension that is always more invasive, because it has a humongous positive potential, but if we are not attentive and critical, this could lead to problems. Zuboff, an American scholar, wrote a book a few years ago, The Capitalism of Surveillance. We are all under surveillance without knowing how to defend ourselves. And that's a problem to consider. So I think we can call it a day. So that's the end of our panel. Thank you very much for your patience. But I think it was worth it. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Enjoy your evening.